Guys, it's a Chookman here once again in Hogan, but Hogan's in the lounge room sound asleep, so I'll let him sleep. There's an old saying, leave sleeping dogs lie. That just means if the dog's sleeping, don't go and wake him up because you're going to get bitten. That's a lot of old sayings I love. There's a lot of, old sayings that I grew up with. Another one is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Anyway, you get my drift. Guys, I tell my story because I've lived through some really horrific and sad stories, and it's good for me to get on YouTube and tell my story because it helps other people out there that understand their story and how they can better themselves. Now, I'm far from perfect. I don't class myself as perfect because I'm not. I've got a lot of faults. I've lived through some really, really bad abuse. My natural mother, she abused me because she had drug and alcohol and mental problems on board. I was taken off her because she just kept abusing me. I'm not going to go into the abuse that she did to me. I've got it all documented because the government, thank God, when I went to Open Place in Collingwood, they documented it and gave it to me in a folder, and it's horrific. The stories that have been documented in this folder would make any parent cry. That the abuse I suffered when I was a 2-month-old baby. And then I went to a foster family back in the 70s, starting from when I was 2 years old, and they abused me. I won't go into the abuse from detail to detail what they did to me because it's really horrific, it's really sad, and you don't do this to young kids. I don't care who you are, you should never ever teach kids violence because then people, like some people I spoke to the other day, said to me, most people that have been abused follow it through, and do it to other people. No, that's not correct. Just because I've been brought up with violence, I will not do that to other people. It's not right. That's why I love animals and I love life and I try to be happy through all that violence I've been through, and I've shown I have got a heart. I do cry. I do get emotional. I am switched on. I do feel other people's pain when I see sad stories on the news, whatever it is, car crashes or murders or things. I have tears rolling down my face and my brain's thinking, why would you do that? You know, um, to have a comment to say that most people that are being abused, they're the likely ones that will go and abuse other people. That's not true. One of my followers asked me that question. Um, just because you've been brought up with violence doesn't mean that you will go and treat everyone else the way you were treated, because that's not how it rolls. Not for me anyway. But it is what it is. It's a hard life. It's not an easy life. And I was one of the lucky ones that survived through all those years of abuse. I was on the streets age 16. Now, back in my day, I ran away from home when I was 13. The coppers brought me back to the home and they told me the golden rule back in the 70s. If you wanted to leave that house of horrors, you had to be 16, have a roof over your head and a steady job. But, who made those rules? If you've come from abuse and it's a foster family, can't you read between the lines? Anyway, it's called falling through the gaps. I fell through the gaps. I got to age 16 and then I started living on the streets of St Kilda, married to a long neck bottle of beer, drowning my sorrows and becoming an alcoholic. So I punished myself for something that was out of my control. I didn't ask to be abused. I was too young. I didn't know right from wrong, but bringing me up with violence, My foster old man said, you know what, you'll do as you're told, when you're told, and how you're told. And if you don't like it, this is what you're going to cop. So you could probably imagine how much violence that really did to me, what it showed to me as I was growing up from a young boy, trying to learn things in primary school and then high school. The first thing I did when I got to high school, because I'll be honest with you guys, I hated primary school and I hated high school only because the violence I suffered, and then I went to school and suffered violence because I had an adopted mother and she was a lot older. She was in her 50s, but she looked old. All the kids used to tease me. And kids can be very violent to other kids that are not as strong as what they are. It blows my mind when I hear people talking about violence, kids against kids. That's been happening for years and years. Like, I'm 56. That's been happening before I was even born. But it's only since the last couple of years people have been standing up, calling it out, which they should. And that's a good thing. But back in my day, they didn't call violence out. They let it happen. You would go home with ripped clothes. Not only did you get bashed at high school, but you got bashed when you got home for having ripped clothes. Alright guys, I hope you get the big picture. Violence is not on, and people that get brought up with violence, they do not repeat it to other people. That's how I see it, and that's how I stand. I have got morals and standards. Alright guys, as I always say, take care and look after your mental health.